everybody. I thought I would take you through Galatians 4, 1 through 7 briefly as a way of answering your question for today's reading set, and also as a way of better understanding how Paul uses the adoption metaphor to show how Gentiles can be included. First thing to notice about Galatians 4, 1 through 7 is that it's divided into three sections, which I have laid out for you here. Section number 1 is verses 1 through 2. Section number 2 is verses 3 through 5. Then section number 3 is verses 6 through 7. And notice how Paul's line of reasoning progresses through these sections. In section number 1, the heir is a child and therefore is not really any different than a slave would be, although the heir is technically the owner of everything and will inherit sometime. He actually or she has no access to the inheritance and therefore is under the authority of someone else until the time of the inheritance. So to begin with, Paul wanted to be clear that it is possible to be an heir without that being a constructive or positive experience. So we'll call this section the heir is a slave. In section number 2 then, Paul suggests that that's what it was like to be a Jew before Christ came. They were to inherit, they were God's chosen people, but that ended up being no better than slavery because they had no actual access to the inheritance. However, when Christ came, everyone was redeemed under the law and received adoption as sons. So everyone is now adopted as the firstborn son and will automatically receive the inheritance. So in the middle section then, the theme of adoption emerges as a way of understanding how it is that Christians come to be God's son and what that means in terms of receiving the inheritance. In the third section then, he brings this argument to a conclusion and shows what it means to have been adopted as God's firstborn son through Christ. And what it means is that now we are an heir in the positive sense, that we actually have access to. We have all the rights and privileges pertaining thereto. So like the firstborn son, we are the true inheritors of the blessings that God promised way back beginning with the covenants to Abraham and going forward from there. So in the third section we say that we are now all full heirs of the promises and everyone can inherit. Now, the key to all this is that if it's true that the inheritance comes through adoption and not by natural birth, in the first section it's natural birth, here it's adoption. If it's true that it comes through adoption, then anyone who has faith can be adopted as a firstborn son of God. So a Jew obviously can be adopted as a firstborn son of God, but so can a Gentile. And once adopted, there's no legal difference between the two. So Gentiles are full members of the community. Jews are full members of the community. He even goes on in chapter 3 to say men and women are no different because they're adopted in the same way. Slaves and free are no different because they're adopted in the same way, and so forth. So this adoption metaphor becomes a central way of understanding how Paul thinks that both Jews and Gentiles will inherit the promises of Abraham in the same way.